just approaching that as, and when talking about anticipating their AI use, not in a punitive or pejorative sense, right? Not in a sense of like, how can I catch what they're going to do, but rather, how can I know or anticipate what it is that they're going to want to do with it? And how do I help them to understand where that might be productive and where that might be unproductive for the kinds of work that we'd be doing in my writing class? My writing class is largely structured around the idea of misconceptions about writing, beliefs that students might hold or have developed through their other experiences with writing that might prevent them from actively engaging both in my course and in their own learning to write. Like beliefs about writing being a talent that you're born with and either you have it or you don't, or the idea that the only people who really need to learn to write are people who are going to someday move on to become authors or editors or writers themselves, right? And so we take time in my class to address these sort of bigger misconceptions around things like writerly identity, writing in the workplace, writing process, multimodal writing and composing, and things that usually students tend to get caught on, right? Like they don't want to engage my questions about how they write personally because they're not that invested in their own writing, because they don't think they need to learn how to write because they don't think that's what they're going to do someday, right? And so we break apart those conceptions throughout various sorts of activities and assignments. But a big part of that has now, I think another conception that's sort of come up that we've had to deal with is the idea that can AI replace writing, right? Can AI replace the writing and thinking processes that students and people should be engaging in through the inquiry that happens in the writing process? So that just kind of became a built-in part of every single function, every single part of the major activities and units of the course, that we looked at each of the major units, not just through the lens of misconceptions research, writing research that I was bringing into the class, but also through how does AI enter into that conversation. And each assignment had a component in it that asked them either to engage AI through the material that we were doing or asked them to apply AI in some sort of functional way. So my course is broken up into three bigger units. One, we deal with the idea of who is a writer. And in that unit, we mostly are just talking about concepts. It lasts 2 weeks. It's very short. And then we move into a sort of unit that's dedicated to just exploring and playing with AI. So from the outset, I want them to believe and know I'm somebody who expects you to use AI. I understand that you probably will use it. And I'm okay with that as long as we are doing it in a way that is transparent, ethical, and productive and not unproductive. My syllabus has a clause in it about AI use and how they're supposed to use it. They're supposed to include a statement and any sort of writing that they do with AI. But also it says in there, like, go ahead and use AI to make papers. But usually when you do that, if you don't work with it intensely and ethically, it results in C work. And a C is not enough to pass English 101 and move on in the university core curriculum. They need at least a C+. So it effectively tells them, use AI for the class, you still won't pass, right? So in that second AI unit, I introduced them to ChatGPT, I introduced them to prompt engineering, I introduced them to all other kinds of AI tools and the abundance of things that AI can do for them as a way to start a conversation to understand what they know. And honestly, I feel like they are rather unsavvy in a lot of ways about the way that they at first come to AI. They think about using AI. They will report their own AI use. I mean, several of them, admitted to me like, oh yeah, I don't remember what the papers were I wrote in high school because I used AI for all of them. And there were many moments where they were willing to be open with me about it because they thought I was somebody who was okay with this, right? Who was accepting of their AI use and didn't look to or seek to punish them, but rather sought to support them and to help them develop their AI usage. And so in that second unit or so, we explore the idea of writing professionally, who writes, in what context do people write, and really what makes good writing. How do we determine what makes writing effective in the context that we're in? And part of that involves them using AI to produce texts and then evaluate it critically. Create this kind of an essay with the AI and tell me why or why not it's effective. You also then write one and tell me how yours is better and or worse than the AI's, and vice versa. They're asked to do a genre analysis where they ask the AI both to produce that kind of genre and then go look at professional examples and do comparisons. We look at how AI is structured in terms of how LLMs develop and are trained so that they understand why there are kinds of hallucinations, errors, inconsistencies, why there are commonalities, and why the same sort of basic prompt generally generates the same general kind of text, right? We move on to a third unit that talks about writing process, including invention, research, revision, editing. And in each of those steps, we look at how to use the AI and how to prompt it effectively for each moment in the writing process, both in the ways that it can be really supportive and generative and the ways that it won't be. And through all of those exercises and activities, ultimately at the end, their final essay, they are required to use AI a certain number, like prompt AI a certain number of times, create their own log of all the AI prompting, all of the generated results from ChatGPT or whatever it might be, or if they use something else like Notebook LM to show you how they used it there as well, and then produce a reflection that sort of talks about how their process was augmented through and with the AI. And ultimately, the majority of the reflections and the drafts seem to suggest, and there might be some halo effect going on here, right, of them wanting to tell me what they think I'm supposed to hear. But that said, I think the AI is a really incredible generative tool, but I also recognize a lot of the places where it didn't really feel as helpful as I thought it would be when I was really trying to challenge it and when I was really trying to get into the deep stuff of the papers that I was writing. And so through the course of the semester, just constantly forcing them to interact with the I think they came away with a better awareness of the limitations of it and also with a greater understanding of how they might engage it through specific moments of need and writer's block and challenges that they're encountering in their writing process rather than using it to replace their writing process and to replace the critical thinking that they have to do.
Sounds like a lot of work.
It was, but it was fun.
And this is just your experience teaching Comp 101, working the Writing Center for years and years, which of course, if you're not familiar with the Writing Center, helps bridge the gap between the incoming student and where they need to be to go on to any coursework. Like I've overheard students in the Writing Center go, they're killing me. They make me write 2 pages a night. The Writing Center's like, you can do it. They're going to bring you up to that level. So that's where this comes from.
Mm-hmm.
Any of that make any sense to any of you? I was blinded by science at several points.
Well, it makes sense, but I mean, in my experience, like, that's not what students are doing. So I just came out of a PowerPoint by one of the students. I mean, what they're doing is using AI to basically write their PPTs or to write their papers, and it's the AI that's replacing the thinking. Right. And so, like, I don't have a policy, like, because the university actually doesn't have a policy. And, but I know, because, like, again, they were talking about books that weren't used in the class. And then there were kind of obscure books by one author. It was just like, well, first of all, how did you know that book existed? And I know you didn't read it on your own.
Right.
So that's the experience with undergrads, and I would say the last thing would be like a tall tale sign is when their writing is so good. I'm like, you shouldn't be able to write like me yet, right? And that's what they're doing. And I would say on the graduate level, same thing. I would say, but with a difference. There are some graduate students who use it. Where I had a graduate student give their discussion starter or the points that they listed. I was like, hold on, because some of the stuff they're saying is like, one, that's not what exactly is going on in this specific text, and two, so let me ask ChatGPT for this thinker to generate that, and almost point by point, right? And the person had bullet points, like actually, like ChatGPT would generate. And I would say, lastly, like I have graduate students who lose their like cultural background. They lose their own voice.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so what happens is, the ChatGPT and AI has a very specific, like the grammar and the grammar rules that they use and the kind of meaning that they want to express. And so I've actually asked students, and I've talked to some of my graduate students and told them, like, I know you don't talk like this. This is not even representative or expressive of who you are and actually what you want to say. And so part of the problem of AI, and again, there's only so much, there's no policy, so if they want to do it, I just try to discourage them from doing it. Like, you can't retain your cultural background using AI, and so I don't know how to get them to manage that, because on the one hand, there's some cultural backgrounds that are actually devalued, and if you listen to them, you'd be like, that's not correct English, and that's not even intellectual. So how can you be smart? Like, how can this be a research paper? And so, even for graduate students, even though they come from a certain kind of cultural background, they want to fit into what's normal. They want to fit into what's valued. They want to fit into what's automatically taken up, given the grammar and the logical construction of the sentence, like as intelligent. So I would say those are the kind of things that, like, I worry about, because AI is reproducing for some, I would say mainly for students of color, their own devaluation. And disabling them to really express and think in ways that more fully express like what they want to say.
Yeah, I think that a lot of those behaviors that you're talking about are the sort of default behaviors that we as instructors sort of all anticipate that are going to be the things. And the things that I will, working with these first year students, anticipated, like, this is probably the default, right? Like, let me go ask the AI to write this paper. And that's what many of them admitted to me that they were doing. And so I was hoping that, like, intense intervention in the first year might make a difference. Of course, that was only 35 students that I worked with in one semester, right? And they're not getting that necessarily in every English 101 class. And hopefully in 10 years, if this kind of instruction becomes more commonplace in first year writing instruction, by the time that you see them in an advanced philosophy course or Africana studies course, they would have more of that critical view of like how AI may or may not be effective in those sorts of ways. And I think that one of the things that had been most transformative for many of my students as I worked with them was my ability to name exactly those things and tell them that I was able to observe those things in the feedback, right? I was able to observe that this writing is dull and boring and lifeless, and it doesn't have any of your voice, nor does it have any of your critical thinking and individual perspective, right? And the absence of those things contributed to X grade because of these sorts of things, but they also just made me uninterested in reading your work. One of the last things I had said to my students as sort of a summary for them when we were talking about AI was that AI raised the skill floor a lot for writing, right? That now everybody has access to this tool, and if, the least literate person in the world used to be at a 0 writing ability, now with ChatGPT, they're at least at a 50, right? So now everybody is at least at a 50, which means if they want to be better and stand out, in order to be viewed as a competent writer or successful writer, now they have to jump up to 75. They always have to be able to at least beat the machine. And they're never going to stand out if they're constantly only regurgitating someone else's voice, and that voice is the most uninteresting, bland, white version of that idea and that thing.
It's an average.
Yeah,
It's
right.
an average of everybody, which means an average of the dominant
average.
culture.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right.
So it innately crushes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
culture.
that sort of feedback, there were times where I gave my students feedback that was, I don't know if this is AI. Honestly, like this writing, this like sentence or this paragraph here sounds kind of funny to me. And maybe it's AI, maybe it's not AI. But the fact that I have to ask you if it's AI means that your writing is boring. And if it looks like AI, it smells and sounds like AI, like I'm not engaging with this piece of the writing. So maybe this is a place where you need to revise. And either way, it was a signal for them to think, oh, as I'm revising this, like this is a sentence that maybe the AI did generate and he didn't like it, so I got to work on it now. Or maybe it didn't generate it and they have to think about, why did my voice sound like an AI? How did I make it boring?
Yeah, I want to go back to what they have to be at least a C+. They have to beat the machine. But I want to go back to what you said about you're starting with freshmen, their first semester of college, and you're trying to put them on a better path. Those of you who are teaching more advanced courses, you are dealing with the kids who had this parachuted into their laps for free without a single word from us in 2023. So from January of 2023 to December of that year, you had kids figuring it out on their own. And you told me something I never forgot. You said, I felt like, as a veteran educator, that before COVID, like 2018, 19, it was getting harder to get them to maintain the right reading levels, and it was getting tougher. Or you felt like they were, maybe, you'll correct me if I misquote you, but they were reading less. Then COVID comes along and sends everybody home for 2 years. This interferes with their education and their development. And then AI comes along, this tempting silver bullet that they think can just bridge that gap and get them over the hump and get them through school. And so it's like AI came along at the exact wrong time to do the most damage to us, because we were already reeling from pandemic stuff.
Yeah, I wanted to mention also that, well, thank you so much also
Yeah.
for sharing this with us. For me, I teach Spanish, of course, so it's very tempting for the students when we assign writing assignments specifically, to just go to ChatGPT and just type in, whatever the topic is, like, I don't know, write a dialogue in a restaurant or whatever in Spanish, voila, there it is. And I don't know, maybe it's our fault too, because we put so much emphasis in correcting the grammar, the punctuation, blah, 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 so that puts a lot of pressure, and I really want them to know that it's okay to make mistakes, that's why they're learning, there is a process, and but it adds pressure because they're writing in a different language. So this has been a problem, and I also teach an online class where it's even more difficult for me to, I mean, kind of what you were saying, I read something and I know in class those students cannot say my name is Peter or whatever in Spanish, but then they write these perfect essays, and very cliche, with a lot of words that even I wouldn't use, but that AI would use,
Right.
So I know, but of course I can't really say, hey, you used this or that. And my other worry, and I'm really, really trying to incorporate AI. I just went to a conference on AI and trying to bridge AI with humanities, and I don't know how, but I wrote a paper on Don Quixote and AI, kind of on text levelers. So, which was very interesting. But my problem is sometimes with what you're talking about COVID, I did also notice that difference between students pre-COVID and post-COVID, where they've become more, I don't know, I don't want to use lazy, but it's like there's this apathy in general. It's very difficult to get them, to motivate them. And so it's easy to just go to ChatGPT or whatever, and let's have this do the work for me. But because of this, I find if I did something like what you're doing in one of my courses, where I asked them to, for instance, share with me the whole log, what's your dialogue with the machine, with the bot, perhaps because that means more work for them too, because it's before it's just like, okay, well, let's just write an essay. And yes, that is work, but I'll maybe take 5-10 minutes to do it and it's done. But in this other case, you're asking them to write the essay, maybe put it in, then ask ChatGPT or whatever, hey, what's wrong in here? But don't correct it for me, just tell me what's wrong. So they go through the process and they have to think about what's wrong and blah, 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 and all that. And that entails more work for them, also for us, but for them. And so I don't know how you handle that, because for me it's very difficult to make them do the minimum work. So it's like, if I even add on to that, how are they going to respond to that? And I was wondering how you handle these.
I mean, it's a really good question, and I think the language learning problem is it's funny. I was thinking about this after you emailed me, and how I think that AI is a really wonderful tool for learning languages. I've studied Japanese for like 20 years. I'm not super great at it. I took one of Satoshi's classes like a couple years ago, and I quite enjoyed it. But Japanese is kind of interestingly, fundamentally funny, because we have to do so much handwriting to learn all the symbols, as opposed to Spanish, where you're probably perfectly fine because they don't need to learn the alphabet, right?
Yeah.
So they type in all these sorts of things. But it kind of blows my mind a little bit, right? As opposed to maybe some of the work that we're asking them to do, where I'm asking them to do things that fundamentally they might not always think have value, right? Like analyze the genre of a lab report. They're like, okay, whatever. Like, this is not going to have value for me necessarily, right? Like, this is not something that I signed up for. This is not something that I'm terribly interested in. But first, a language learning class, you would think that they would be invested sort of intrinsically, in the sense of like, I actually want to learn, as opposed to just the exchange value that they usually think of in my class.
It's a requirement. 140A and B are requirement. In COLA, they're required.
Oh,
so
really?
some students are very motivated, but they're the minority. Most of the students are like, I just want to get this done, it's a requirement, and be done with it.
That's difficult.
So, but I really want to motivate them and to get something out. So also in terms of enrollment, we want to expand our classes. So if you get them interested in the first year, then maybe they will continue. But it's it's difficult if they're getting everything from AI, you know.
Right,
So,
yeah.
I don't know, yeah.
Absolutely.
It's not a silver bullet for everyone, but in
Mhm.
creative fiction, something that Pinckney and I talked about doing is ask creative writing students to write a story about the happiest day of their life or the saddest day of their life. Nobody, I mean nobody, hands that off to ChatGPT. They won't do it because it'll just be blah and it'll be offensive to them. It'll be as offensive to them as their GPT work is to you. And I don't know how you translate that to other things, but creative fiction has that built in. They already care about their stories. In 308, they use AI a little bit. In 208, in our creative fiction courses, they use AI, but these are their characters. This is their novel, their short story. They usually inherently care too much about it to let GPT maul it.
Yeah.
And I don't know how you translate that positive interaction with the technology to other disciplines where they're like you say, I'm not sure I'll ever use this again, so I'm going to let GPT half-ass it and take my C+.
So one of the things that's probably important to talk about here is, because you know that one of the things that they're concerned about is like, okay, if I insert a grammar error, if I use the wrong verb tense, right, like I'm going to get a little red mark, it's going to impact my grade, right, like ultimately that's, they're measuring their grade, right? And so something that is probably important to know about my class and the way English 101 is taught is that it does not use a traditional grading model. It uses a labor-based grading contract. So students earn a certain grade, not based on the quote quality of their work, but based on the level of intellectual engagement that they demonstrate with the concept and their effort in demonstrating that engagement. So for the vast majority of students, when they submit a paper in my class, they are always more or less guaranteed a B. The contract more or less says that a C represents the laziest form of the work. So if you have to turn in a genre analysis, you turn in something that looks like a genre analysis, but it's boring, it lacks detail, it clearly shows that you just phoned it in, you used AI. A B demonstrates that you've actually taken the task seriously and that you have engaged the work, you've answered the questions, you've deployed course concepts, and I can see that in your work. An A is either you do that stuff really, really well, or there's an additional task that I give the students that they can do in order to demonstrate extra engagement and to earn the A. So for example, in one of the assignments, they had to visit the writing center twice with their paper, and that would bump them from a B to an A. So as long as they qualified for a B, they would get an A as long as they used the writing center. In some ways, the sort of mantra of the class was like, the more time you invest and the more you demonstrate that you're willing to invest in your work, the better your grade will be. So it removed from them the pressure of delivering a certain sort of quality of work in order to earn their grade, right? Which I think also divested some of the sense of like, I must use AI to achieve a certain quality in order to achieve a certain grade. And so I wonder, like separating grading from feedback from learning, right, I think was generative in this case because it removed maybe some of the motivation to use AI to fix what they perceive as deficiencies, right? I had a lot of students who, are sort of those like Chicago Hope Scholar type kids who come with a lot of grammar errors, syntax errors, sentence level inabilities, and they used AI openly in my class to help them mitigate some of those issues, and I was okay with it. We talked about it. I showed them how to do that. But it removed from them the case of like they're always feeling like I have to have AI write this from top to bottom, because if I don't, nothing I produce has ever gotten above a C. Because I gave them a way to get to a B and an A that didn't involve them producing perfect prose. It involved them trying to just deeply engage with the thinking of my class. And that, I think, opened up some of that space where we weren't as concerned about why did this get a C versus an A versus a B, but why did we engage these questions, or why did we do these sorts of things with the AI? And so with a class like a Spanish class, right, I wonder if some of that involves removing, like you said, the stigma of like failing and like tripping over the language and being willing to, have some mistakes in your oral exam just to gain some fluency, right? Mm-hmm. And not feel wounded by a C or, a 7 out of 10 on my homework, that it would have been perfect if I had used AI.
It's very different, right? Because your whole course is about writing,
mm-hmm.
in a sense. Ours is just one ingredient in the course.
Mm-hmm.
They have to do so many other things, so it's difficult to. And then it's tied, like what you were mentioning, the example you were giving, Toby, about giving them topics that are so personal that they would feel uncomfortable asking about to write it for them. It's also hard because we have to tie usually our topics to the because they don't have already all that pre-existing language.
No, this is a luxury of the creative writing class.
Right.
It bakes in from the start emotional attachment to the work.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't know how you feel about this, Andrew, but I feel like for our discipline, for philosophy, like what you just explained, is very difficult to execute because part of the philosophical task is to sit for 3-4 hours doing a reading assignment and engage. Like you have to like break down not only like what the paragraph is, but what is the author even responding to, right? And so for us, at least for how I understand philosophy, the discipline of philosophy, like what AI is doing, it's taking away from students that discipline, effort, and energy that is needed to actually think through the philosophers that we're asking them to engage in a short week where they might have to read a significant chunk,
Right.
and if they have to hand in weekly assignments, they might just really skim through and then turn to AI because like that fortitude, like those inner resources that you actually need, AI is disabling it.
Yeah. Right.
Right. And so I feel like on some level, like we're being replaced, because part of the task is learning actually how to think on a high level. And I would say, and then specifically for some of my classes, when I teach in Africana philosophy, you have to synthesize the material.
Right.
So there's not just one. There's one main author that we're dealing with, but then there are going to be 2 or maybe 3 folks who are reading that author in that specific section of the text in different ways. Where now I'm asking you to synthesize the material, and what I find even at the level of graduates is what they're doing is maybe AI. Maybe there's a AI version of 1 or 2 of the authors alongside of the main reader, because the dominant author that we're reading is like a well-known author that AI, it's already plugged into AI, and AI can give you some kind of understanding of what's going on in that section. And so it's like I don't feel like I'm a police officer, I'm not a probation officer, right? Like I'm not a psychologist or a counselor, where like I need to sit and walk you through this process. But what's happening is AI, I feel like, is 2 things. One, at the level the discipline of philosophy, and like learning actually how to think at a high level. And again, you can disagree with this, so you can chime in. And then at the level of synthesizing, right? They can't, right? And so they turn to AI to synthesize. And like I can see it's like, one, that's not the philosophical framework I'm asking you to think through. And 2, this is a bad synthesis. Like that's not actually what's going on. And so like I'll ask, I won't embarrass them in terms of the AI, but I won't embarrass them in terms of their thinking process, right? But then it's just like, okay, they're like, okay, so what, right? So I would say at least for the discipline, what you just said in terms of like what you offer, like I think that in terms of like what I expect from my class and how I understand the disciplines of philosophy, we can't do that.
Well, I say like one way, like back when I was even in your class, like obviously I didn't use it what I would consider appropriately at first, but I feel like for most subjects there's always like a way that it can be used, and you can tell what you guys think of this as philosophers, but like having to make an AI bot that speaks as, I don't really know philosophers, let's just say Plato or something like that. You know what I mean? Like it's like so you're getting an opportunity for an AI that knows all of Plato's work, and you're basically in a way speaking to Plato. Like what were your thoughts on this? Like having to go back and forth with the best example of Plato that you can have, if that makes sense. I don't know what you guys' thoughts are or something like that, but basically being able to speak to the philosophers that you study.
What do you mean? Is that as a possible assignment or a possible exercise?
I mean, yeah, just as a way. Like if you're in a unit in which you're, I don't know, who's a philosopher?
Yeah, Plato.
Plato, okay, yeah, we could use Plato. So, like, if you're learning Plato this unit, first of all, the student would have to, like, kind of read through, not necessarily read through Plato's work, but, like, know his work enough to be like, okay, I want to learn about, like, these 3 pieces of work. You plug that into a GPT, and then that GPT has all of that knowledge at your disposal. So it's like, you know, I could email my professor and kind of ask what they think of this, go to office hours. Most students aren't inclined to do that. But if they're just able to take out their phone and be like, hey, Plato, like, what did you mean when you made that allegory or whatever it may be? And then it just go to that, and they can learn about it, and they can have conversations. Because I often will, like, find out a historical topic or something like that, and then I'll just start talking to AI about it. Like, because personally, I learn best just, like, being able to ask constant questions. And that was always the thing when I was going through school. Was like, I would always fall behind because I'm like, I want to ask a question, but, like, A, I don't want to look stupid. I would have to have, like, 10 follow-ups after that to really get the idea. But if I am able to just, on my phone, which obviously my generation is addicted to, am able to speak to this philosopher, I would feel like I would be way more entertained and go into more depth. But, I mean, obviously, I also what you're saying, like, it does take away your voice. Like, I've written essays with GPT that are just straight up not me, but I've also read some that are very much so me. So it's like, you know, that you have to learn that and teach that. But mainly, I'm just thinking of, like, how would you guys feel about speaking to the philosophers you study?
Yeah, that's a great way to use it, I guess. I mean, I use it all the time when I read something, I come across something that I'm reading for class, and I don't know what it is. I go to chat and say, what is this? And I'm constantly, I've got, you know, because there's all kinds of things that come up in philosophy that I'm not familiar with, so I'll plug in, what's this, what's that? You know, and conversations going, and yeah, so, I mean, there's lots of, it's really handy. Right? I mean, I'm using it every day now. I mean, it's not at a very fancy level. It's just kind of a Google thing.
But that's kind of what I'm saying. Like, it's like, I feel like there's people where they're going to need it for a lot more than others. Like, I know when I was an English major, and when I was writing essays, I probably never got better than a B. They would always say, like, oh, I love your idea, I love your theory, but I can hardly read it. Like, it just ain't coherent. But I just was like, I'm just accepting that. Like, I don't care about grammar or spelling. Like, that's just not how I speak. That's not how I write, anything like that. And I want it to be my voice. So I was always just like, I'll just take the B. That's what I need to get to the next level. But if I had AI, and I don't know, as English teachers, you guys, or, you know, teachers, you guys can say what you think of this, I would definitely just plug it to AI. Be like, all right, now you can read it. But my theory and process was the exact same. I've just made it easier for you because now you can read it. Obviously, the not good part of that is, like, I'm not learning that myself, but if you got it, it's like the calculator thing. Like, if you have it all the time, like, everything I write now, I can do that. Just plug it in, and it'll fix all my, like, weird spelling errors. But I feel like I learned how to write essays before I had access to GPT. So I kind of was able to be like, all right, this is my process of writing essays. I have hundreds of pages of essays. GPT, you can look at that. Like, that's how I write. But yeah, it, you know, it's different for the generation that's, like, starting off with it. So yeah, that's
Prime, you've worked with the technology enough now. A year ago, it was brutal to your writing.
Yeah.
If you give it a page of your writing and say, fix this, it would annihilate you.
Yeah.
Now, the newer versions, you can, and there's two things that have changed. The technology got a little bit better. It does get better. And then you prompt it now. You say, don't change my content. Don't mess with my jokes. Don't mess with my mood. Don't mess with my style. Just correct the bare minimum. Or you say, you prompt and say, list me everything you'd like to change.
Exactly. Yeah, that's another
I'll
good.
decide.
I'll decide what I actually want to change. Yeah.
So a more skilled person with the technology, and the technology improves slightly, you can now write without obliterating your voice.
Yeah. It would literally just be like, it would basically, like, last year, it'd be like, if you want me to fix this, I'm taking away everything you have and restarting, because this is not usable.
Fix this, and it just turns to just a couple dots.
But now,
I mean to think, because Toby, you paraphrased Andrew earlier. You said something about, like,
I probably misquoted
before
him
COVID. You could correct him. Please do. But that prior to COVID, you were already starting to see, like, a slow decline in terms of students, like, deep reading engagement with text, right? And so I wonder for both of you, is what we're seeing now, like indicative of AI accelerating a problem that was already starting to manifest, or it did it itself cause it a different kind of that problem? Because I myself, you'll notice here, I think, so there is a list of readings. I don't read any of those. I don't assign any of those as readings that they have to do out of class because they do not do them. So part of my, in the first year course, part of every day, if there's a reading, we spend 20 minutes in class. I pick the excerpt that I think is the most important, and I read it with them, and we talk through it, and it's sort of like a guided lecture discussion sort of thing that happens, right? But I've noticed a big difference between when I taught it in 2002, where the students were actually kind of a little bit reading. In 2024, I was getting less and less of that, and so I needed to start doing it with them, or they wouldn't get any of that material. And so I've just realized, I think, that even in the very, what I find to be accessible text that I offer for my first year students, that they're not as engaging that deeply. I can't even imagine, right? Like when you are giving them Plato or, other kinds of deep philosophical thinking, the ways that they may or may not have already been engaging those.
Yeah. I think we have to rethink what we're doing in our classrooms as teachers. It's in every field of humanities, especially in things like philosophy. It's just, it doesn't make sense anymore. It's a different world. They don't. Going in, I've been doing it, for a long time, and going in and assigning these books, and we get to read them over the course of the semester. I just got done a 300 level course. We read 5 of the major works of the 17th and 18th century and read them pretty closely. But my sense is that students, they don't have the attention span for it at all. Like sitting down with a book like that is just page after page of text, and it's all very dry and abstract. It's not like an interesting story. It's so off-putting. It's so boring. And they're just not. So back in the day, I think students still had some sense, well, okay, I still got to plow through this. And then students had the ability to plow through. Like, oh, this sucks. This is painful. This is boring, but I know what I need to do this. I have that gear, and I know when to switch. And I don't think that gear exists anymore in young people.
It doesn't.
No. And so I think my old school way of doing things is just obsolete. I mean, I don't know what to do. I think, I've been thinking about this, maybe doing more, so more homework and more class time will be cover less and do more things in class. So writing assignments in class or exercises in class. Worry less about the reading and have it be more question driven and be more exploratory. Like, okay, we're going to discuss an issue, and I know where the issues come from in the books that we study, but let's talk about free will. What do you all think about that? Is there free will? And just let it go and not worry about, I don't know, and just conduct it. I don't know.
That's what I did with one of my classes this semester, and the hardest thing for me was to ask and keep asking, does my class have intellectual integrity?
Yeah, I don't know if that will, but
No. So I'm saying, like,
Yeah.
I struggled.
Yeah.
But my students actually enjoyed what we did, right? It was hard for me.
So what would be the grade kind of assignments or something that you would give for them?
So in class, I actually modeled it like a social media class. So I brought in like panel discussions that were on the theme or topic that I wanted them to, and we'd watch it for like 20 minutes and then break it down and have an open discussion, and then watch another one that was maybe a little shorter for 5 minutes, and then we have another short discussion, and then I'd ask them to write a paragraph.
So you watch a clip of something on
what on the topic or the
That some
theme?
random person posted on.
No. So these will be like either at a conference or a scholar in the field.
Oh, I see. So like video of.
Yeah, so like TikTok, like
Well, that's what I was gonna say.
Yeah,
That's
it's like TikTok.
the way my
So-
generation learns is we see something, we form our opinion, then we look at the comment section and we're like, what do other people think of it? And if our opinion's way off, we're like, ooh, maybe I gotta rethink that. But I'll just wait till I run into this again in another video, and I'll rethink and see what someone else thinks. So it's the way I would recommend kind of doing it is like you say something and you're like, all right, write down what you think about this, and then you have the class discuss it, and people are gonna be like, oh, I did not think that. I'm kidding. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of the way Gen Z thinks. is
Yeah,
what I say,
that's
So
great.
it's two ways. So sorry.
Yeah.
It was the like so I set up like a TikTok like experience, and the cultural influencers were the guest lectures, right? And I limited how how the guest lecturers would speak, so they wouldn't just talk for like an hour. Like I set it up where like, okay, they talk it for maybe like 15, 20 minutes, and then start to engage the students in very specific ways. And while they're talking, the students were allowed to like look up like other information like on their phones, so the speaker didn't think it was like disrespectful to them that the students weren't paying attention. So I actually, set up I told them I was using the exploratory pedagogy in the class, and I'm telling you the hardest thing was for me, not for them. It was more like me. I had to like give in to the process more than they did.
Right.
But like that, not the philosophy class. Actually, it was my Africana studies class. Like if you would have saw their projects at the end, one of them did animation because I did it differently from my philosophy class than I did from my AFR. The AFR had more freedom in terms of they can pick anything that we either discussed in the class or anything that had to do with the overall theme with the class. Some students did an actual anime with the help of AI, where they then did what is it? When you speak into is it the
Voiceover?
The voiceover?
Yeah.
Where they were like doing voice, like it was like amazing. And like all the other students were like, oh, interested not only in the content, like but also like, okay, how do you do that so that we can use it as a teaching method for when we give our project. Other students are engaged. The students were highly engaged in a lot of the projects, so I had to give in.
I also couldn't agree more. I've had this conflict myself between like, well, I don't want to make my class a circus. I still want to keep it, within the realm of, I don't know, academics or whatever. But you're right. I'm going back to the reading thing. I noticed the same thing, but I remember asking one of my daughters, you don't read anymore like you used to when you were younger. And she said, oh, Ma, what do you mean? I read all the time. It's just I don't read books.
Yeah.
I read on the phone. I'm all the time on the phone looking at TikTok, YouTube, watching videos or reading information and stuff, opinions. And it's just, it's very hard for us that have been here for a long time to change. But what you're proposing is wonderful. I'm glad I came here. Actually, I'm learning a lot. So,
And I actually try to pick like people who are like known in the field. So not just like any random person who's a cultural influencer. I actually still tried to make sure it had like some kind of academic content, right? That they were like, and that they were actually offering something. So I didn't just like, oh, this was academic. Okay, I'm just gonna add it. I actually like looked up many different things myself to make sure that it was, the content was appropriate for what I wanted them to watch. And we didn't watch like the whole panel discussion. Maybe TikTok. Maybe I said, okay, we're gonna watch this first 5 minutes, and then we're gonna skip, from 10 to 15, right? So we wouldn't even watch the whole thing because maybe some of the folks who were on the discussion, the panel discussion, were using language where I was like, this might be one of those circumstances where, because I didn't use the language and set the students up so they had that conceptual framework, it's best just to kind of skip it and just move on. So like there were times where like I even had to say like, oh, that's intellectually interesting to me, but not where the students are at this point, because I didn't like teach them that. So I get it, but still like, and I want to get there. Like I want to be able to actually, the reason why I'm here, because I actually want to include like to switch even pedagogically to kind of give in to this process, because again I think like the students had an actual they told me so, like they even stayed after class and then like say like what they thought was valuable from the class, which is again not my everyday end of the semester experience. And so I would like to include AI a little bit more. I also thought about gamification in ways that kind of like keep their attention.
That's the only thing that will. Most history I've learned from Call of Duty, and I do genuinely mean that. Like playing those games, like I'm like, and then but also researching after, I'm like, oh my, that happened. Mm-hmm. Like you know what I mean? But like it has to like be in that form where I'm almost somewhat involved in it, or just self-centered. But yeah, that's
I said Assassin's Creed is
yes,
also
yeah,
a
absolutely. Absolutely.
We may be a little ahead in languages. When I taught literature, it's a different story. I'm more where you guys are, but with languages, because we do a lot of gamification from Kahoots. I've done escape rooms. I don't know. I've tried everything, but you're right. I mean, sometimes it's like it's difficult to break from. Am I just here? Am I an entertainer only, or am I actually teaching something? It's hard sometimes.
I think if Pinckney were here, he would say you can teach through entertainment.
Yeah. That's
he's again the luxury of teaching fiction. It's baked in that you're teaching through.
But I would say for undergrad, still for graduates, I want to hold like at least for our like you can't just ask ChatGPT or AI, I know students maybe don't want to sit for that long, but I just feel like you can't get around that. Like, yeah, you can ask, AI, the ChatGPT give you a synopsis of something, but again, it's thinking for you. And I just think especially for the PhD students, like I don't know how, at least for the discipline to bring AI into that, because I'd rather have them, maybe use Grammarly where they write it first and then they just ask Grammarly, but like ChatGPT, no, because
they're so tempted to replace their own labor. Mm-hmm. It's very tempting to replace your own labor.
It is for us too sometimes.
Yeah, you can say grade this for me. Here's my metrics. Mm-hmm. You can say write this syllabus, put in the, what are they called, outcomes?
The learning outcomes, yeah.
Yeah, he's a master of this, and I believe he did it himself probably, but GPT could do that. But you're touching on something so cool and so dangerous. Mm-hmm. It reminds me of something that you're talking about. What if I just let go and let them augment themselves with the AI to get to this point, and then I push them farther? When I first showed GPT to Jane Kogi, who taught English here for 30 years, my neighbor, and I said, this is what it does, and I had it write an essay on Great Gatsby in front of her. And I said, they want to ban this. She said, 1, they wanted to ban spell check. Good point. 2, she said, if this obsolete, if you pay me to teach A, B, C, and this obsoletes A, I'm going to teach B, C, D, E, F to the same kids in the same semester for the same money. I'm going to send you a kid that is smarter than before this technology existed. And yeah, they need it to get past A, but then they're racing. This is what happened to math with the calculator and stuff. But it is way harder for you two to integrate it into advanced concept education. But we build it into the ground floor, maybe we get there. The other thing you're touching on is the way they've used it. And the kids' term, the gaming term, is galaxy brain. When you do something dumb or you don't know what you're doing, that's small brain activity. When you do something smart or clever, big brain prime.
Yeah.
Big brain. But when you do something incredible that I didn't know you could even think of, that's galaxy brain. And when kids show up in whatever, Philosophy 300, and you're like, yeah, they're going to quote Plato, or they're going to quote Aristotle, they're going to quote this, and they come in and they're like, Heidegger, blah, blah, blah. You're like, wait a damn minute. You can't come in with galaxy brain right off the bat, but they can now, because you're not teaching one person. You're teaching one person with ChatGPT whispering in their ear.
Well, I think, unrelated to AI, my good students are better than my good students were 10, 15 years ago.
Oh, that's interesting.
Because my good students know how to use the internet to look up things.
Okay, yeah.
And they come into class and they ask questions that are like up here now, and they're talking about things. I'm just like, wow, but they're doing homework on their own. searching things, finding out
Mhm.
about stuff, and so the good ones are doing that kind of stuff. You know, I'm sure they're on their phone, check, wait, what was that? The professor said something, and they're looking it up. And so that's been kind of interesting. I feel like some of them are like really accelerating with.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But that's causing a greater divide, right?
Yeah.
If the lower performing students are doing worse post COVID with AI, and the hyper, like, we're getting this like education inequality.
Mm-hmm.
How do we solve that, Prime?
Yeah, I was thinking, because I'm kind of both.
I also wanted to mention that you talked about your daughter doesn't read anymore, but she reads in other
Mhm.
ways. Mandy over at Press, they've been pivoting a little more towards audiobooks
Yeah,
because this generation will listen to a book before
Yeah.
they'll read one.
100%.
They'll listen to it at the gym or on the bus or while they're walking
Right.
across. They would rather, my son tells me this, 28-year-old attorney. He's like, when I have to read a brief, I feed it into an audio, like 11 Labs, and it reads it to me while I'm commuting.
That makes it so much easier. Things like 11 Labs, that we can produce more audiobooks to get more
Mhm.
people to
Right.
read our books than we could if we were having to record the whole thing ourselves and narrate it. So it's helpful from that perspective.
And Duncan, who's interning for you making audiobooks,
Mhm.
he says he listens, if you tell him to read Aristotle, whatever, this passage, he will get an audiobook of it, he'll get the paper copy, he will sit down and put on headphones,
Mhm.
and he will listen and read at
Yeah,
the
for
same
sure.
Oh,
time.
that's
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah.
I'm telling you, that kid shows up, he's armed to the teeth with whatever you're talking about.
And
I
maybe
started
that's part
listening-
of it. You know, we were talking about like not having the endurance anymore of like being able to read large books. I think there's like Brian was talking about like the dialogic element of it, or like that. Like maybe there needs to be more motion in education away from, a unidirectional model, and then back to like the kind of sophistic dialogues, right, of like asking questions back and forth and inviting students into that process. That seems so generative, right, when you give them a little bit of the material to hang on to, and they can just kind of jump and claw in it and tear it in and ask you questions and try to tear it apart, and that's the thing that seems to engage them, right? And so how do we create like the feeling of dialogue, and how can AI be a big part of that, right? That's when you are most generative with AI, is when you are engaging it dialogically rather than in the way that you did Google once upon a time. You put in the question and you just get back whatever it gives you. Something like creating an audiobook and it feeds you this voice, right? It feels in some ways more, I don't know, oddly human, right, than just like dealing with the text, or that you have another voice that's in you that's creating a dialogue with you as you're reading through this sort of thing. So maybe part of supplementing our readings now have to require some sort of element that makes it feel to that person that they're doing more than just being by themselves. That by themselves element is not, that was the, individual human achievement has been the humanities forever, right? Like a single authored monograph. And now, like the humanistic study maybe for this generation means that it has to feel collaborative or engaged with another person, another voice, another something. And AI can do that while still maintaining the ability to do that by yourself, quote unquote.
Cool. We've been at it an hour. Enrique's got to go in like 20 minutes anyway. How are the rest of you on time? Do you want to bring up anything else before we escape? Peanut gallery? Everybody over here has taught some courses in their time, so don't be afraid to pipe up.
I was just going to say that I'm a PhD student in history, and I found that if I put my thoughts or do a dialogue with ChatGPT and I say don't add anything, I found that it helps me outline papers so much more organized than the way that my mind does it, because I just sit down and do it. And then it's like, well, this is all a mess. Now I use the outline from ChatGPT, and it's just like, this fits here, this fits here, this fits here. And I was like, that makes so much more sense of cohesively how it would do. I don't let it add anything, but I let it kind of guide me.
I'll ask for like feedback from like different authors.
too.
Like if
Yeah.
I'm writing about like Jack London, I'll be like, hey, what would Jack London say about this? And make sure that everything I'm saying is aligned with whatever concept I'm talking about. And then sometimes I'll like jump and do like Edward Bellamy or something and say like on that same piece, just to get like a different perspective on it.
And I think like you were talking about earlier with recognizing this is GPT level work, that's come in handy knowing how to recognize that with the press stuff, because we've had freelancers try to send in GPT work and things like that they did not edit in any way. And then it's just, a year ago before it was as advanced as it is now. And it was really just clunkily written. It was really difficult. It's supposed to be back cover copy for a book, and it was something that we could not put out into the world. And so it's stuff that just gives us an idea of we need to be more critical of this. We need to make sure we're looking for this because people will use it, but we just need to learn how to recognize it and how to teach them to make that better and make it their own voice.
Quote her again. That's exactly, according to Jane Kogi, if they have better tools, you better be getting better work. You better be getting farther in the same time. Like, we want what you're getting out of those advanced students for everybody. I don't know how we do it. I don't have a silver bullet for that, but the fact that that's happening.
I mean, I don't think they're doing anything extraordinary. It's just they're using their phones to look things up that they're curious about, and being curious and not understanding something or wanting to go further about something, and then they'll go, and they'll read those things. I don't know, and I don't know that that's just a level of engagement, just a step above some of the students who.
Right, and that's been a fundamental problem in every sort of like resource that students have always had access to, right? For writing centers, for decades, we've known that the majority of students that come to the writing center, they are students who probably would succeed anyways. Like they recognize that they are able to name and say, I have these particular needs in writing, and I can identify a resource that is helpful. I will go and I will use it, and I will excel at myself. But their writing is usually already above par. And the students who might really benefit from those kind of intervention in the writing centers are often those students who don't do those other behaviors and say, I know I have these needs, I can identify resources, I'm willing to go use those resources, right? And so whether it's me, the tutoring center, or housing with all of their programming, the advising staff here, we all have the same question of like, how do we use how do our resources become more attractive? How do we get these students who we know need it the most, or could benefit from it the most, I should say maybe, to be curious enough to use it and to really engage it? And I don't know that we've ever found a really great example, but the more of these resources, AI, or even Google back in the day, I'm sure, is the same thing, that these resources exist and are there, and the students who really learn how to leverage it are the ones who are probably going to be okay anyways, right?
I'm wondering a little bit about the future, because you mentioned that perhaps in 10 years everyone in English 101 is using AI and stuff like that. But AI is getting smarter and smarter, and you can also, of course, tell AI what you like, what you didn't like, what they did right or wrong, so that it keeps improving on its own. And I don't know, I wonder, I use CopyLeaks to check my students' work, but at the same time, sometimes, it detects AI use and things like that, but also, so I use another tool also, and in that tool, within that tool, there's another button where students can put in a text and it automatically converts it into it looks like a human wrote it. Exactly. And I'm always curious about that, because I'm like, well, I wonder in 10 years, for instance, where are we going to be? Will we be able even to detect anything? Or will AI be so smart that it will outsmart all of us, completely? I don't know.
In my opinion, you can't really detect it now. Like
we're already there.
Yeah, it's we're past that. I think actually like last month, or it was pretty recent, that like the Turing test got passed, where it's like you can't really discern. Even before that, it was tough. Like those things, like I would put my paper in, and then I'd put a paper that I know for a fact it was written by me. Like I wrote it 7 years ago, and I was like, this was also AI. So it's like you can't, those things are pretty hard to
But
trust.
then she's talking about the stuff that's been sent in to the these freelance journalists and stuff. So how do you detect it?
At the time, it was just because it was really clunky and kind of robotic sounding, and it was before the AI got as advanced as it is now, where it sounds more human, but it was just, those are words, but they don't really make sense the way that they're organized, and it's just, it's a whole lot of words to say nothing, is what it felt like.
Also, this is an experienced English teacher, an MFA, and you guys are better at recognizing it than technology is. You come to me and say, Toby, can you detect it? No, but you kind of can. You can't prove it, is the issue.
Yeah.
That's the thing,
yeah.
right?
You,
And so
you'll
there's-
know. You'll repeat it.
you
though,
know.
but
So so much of the feedback that I give talks about like the quality of it, right? Like the AI generates the stuff, and I mean you insert a bad prompt, you get bad bland writing, and that's the feedback I can give you. I can't be like, this is definitely AI, and I know, but I can say this sounds like AI, and that's bad, and here's why.
It's
It's
also
either
that
AI or you sound like it.
when Vanderbilt was running anti-AI detection, they eventually stopped because their false positive rate was too high for their tastes.
Mhm.
And when they really looked at who it was falsely accusing, so it was accusing innocent kids, those kids were predominantly neurodivergent and English as a second language.
Mm.
So it was really punching down. It was really picking on kids that need more help, not to be accused of cheating. And so their voices sounded kind of whatever. It sounded a little like AI. It sounded a little too robotic, a little too do whatever. So I echo Joe on this. You guys should not have to be policemen in your classroom. You're there to provide a valuable thing, and we got to get them to be curious about it. Curiosity is the greatest asset you can have in your students, period. If you have that, you can go anywhere. And if you don't, you can't go anywhere. Like I said.
But also to echo you, it's kind of cool, right? Like I think we're in a moment where we really are rethinking how to teach, what it means to teach, what it means to use writing in teaching. It's an invitation in a moment that could produce a lot of really cool innovation, and we might see engagement and innovation from students in ways that we haven't before, right? When we were doing things before. So I'm a little excited about it, but I'm gonna probably fail a lot. And there's a lot of changes to make, even to this syllabus, and to the class that I just got done teaching. Too, I felt like, oh man, there's so many things that I need to change as I tried to, create an AI forward-thinking course. I think there's going to be a lot of iteration that needs to happen continually too, because as you say, it just keeps changing on us.
I haven't spent as much time in front of the class as you all have. I've taught college level a little bit, but you all have just done nothing else for like decades. So I yield to you on this, but I'll tell you as a technologist, I want to comfort you and say, you guys got over this. You got over the internet. You figured it out. You got over Wikipedia. You got over computers. You got over word processors. The math classroom got over calculators. Every once in a while, we invent something that really messes you up, the classroom. And you'll get over this. That's true, that's optimism. But no one's ever had to get over anything as powerful as this before. Not since the printing press. That is the last time humanity has just flipped how we learn, how we access information, who gets access to it. Everybody now. This is not a rumble underneath your feet, it's an earthquake. And as sooner you treat it like that, and I hear you starting to let go, become just an AI anarchist. I love that for you. I love it. I'm so excited.
And what someone mentioned to me at the conference I went to is that actually AI is becoming a discourse in itself. I mean, we prove of it, right here, talking about it. So eventually, maybe we won't be talking about Plato and Aristotle. There will be AI philosophers, and that will be the new discourse. I don't know, but I think that's the way we're going, because this is not going anywhere.
And you're right. This is how it is now. This is the worst it will ever be. And this place we support video game tech and VR and AR. VR and AR don't piss anybody off. They have developed very slowly. They were terrible at first. They would make you throw up. No one's intimidated by VR. No one's getting replaced by VR. No one's using VR to do their work for them. So VR is like this friendly, cute technology you moonlight with. And AI is this either this scary monster or this, it's much, much faster, more violent. Well, thank you all for coming. You're all.
Well, thank you for organizing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great.
I just wanted this to happen. Michelle. I just wanted that to happen. That was great. I really appreciate all of you, and I hope it helps. And we'll do this again. Nobody's around in the summer usually, but I'll do it again at the beginning of the fall semester, and we'll try to get a few more. But I'm honestly kind of thrilled that it was just you all. I've had really good talks with all of you, and whatever you said to me stuck with me. Yeah, don't worry about that. It's a little Discord.
Oh, I was like, did I squeak this
No,
chair?
The Discord squeaks. That was that was a 11 Labs AI reproduction of an axolotl, which is not at all accurate. They don't make that noise. AI is wrong about
Must
that.
have been the wind.
It's Graham. Welcome, Graham. How you doing?
Hello.
Well-
I've been listening in.
Oh, cool. We're quitting, but I recorded it. I'm going to put it on the CVEX. With everybody's permission, I'm going to put it on the CVEX.